Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
Our guest today is a successful British songwriter who has written for some of popular music's major artists. His big breakthrough came with the UK new wave group Q-Feel with the hit single Dancing in Heaven in 1982. This led our guest to move into Los Angeles and working with Maurice White of Earth, Wind and Fire on the 1983 album Electric Universe. He went on to work with Elton John's songwriting partner Bernie Taupin to create the #1 hit singles We Built This City by Starship and These Dreams by Heart. He played keyboards on Ray Parker Jr.'s 1984 Ghostbusters theme, produced Robbie Robertson on his 1987 self-titled album, and wrote the hit single King of Wishful Thinking by Go West. He's also collaborated with Kim Carnes, Barbra Streisand, Neil Diamond, Chaka Khan, Paul Young, Robbie Williams, and produced his own solo musical projects. A very warm welcome to the gifted songwriter Martin Page, who joins us from his LA home, shall I say, a studio, to talk life, music, and of course, the art of songwriting. A long introduction.
Yeah, but it was a good introduction. I actually felt quite proud there. I was thinking, did I do all those things? Did I really do all that? Yeah, okay. I'm quite pleased with that. That sounds good. Thank you, James.
Thank you kindly for joining us. I feel honored to have you as a guest on the show.
My pleasure.
You follow some other artists that we've had on your take. We've had David Knopfler of Dire Straits fame, and the songwriter Tom Russell. So thanks for joining us. We're gonna take the clock back in a minute and kind of go back in history and find out about your early life, your career, and the creative process of songwriting. But first of all, I wanted to ask you, in current time, so currently where we're at the moment, I believe you've been working on a long-term musical project that you've been mixing in the studio. Just want to find out about the songs you've written and just a bit about the album, the project.
Well, James, it's one of those projects that you think it's going to be quite quick, and then it becomes a 5-year project. I was very fortunate that a lot of the musicians that worked with me back in the 90s on In the House of Stone and Light album, which I made as a solo artist, and it did quite well, that all these musicians recently, 5 years ago, started dropping to my house again here in the Radio Owl's Nest, I call it, where we make the records. And it was just a really special time to, in the later years, make a record again with all the people that helped you create a record back in the 90s. It helped me launch my career in some ways. So Jimmy Copley, the drummer that comes from very near you, Bath, and Bristol. He played on. I wanted him to play on this record, but unfortunately he had leukemia, and really the whole album started around trying to get him to fly across to me to do one more record. Unfortunately, Jimmy couldn't make it. He passed away. But at the same time, Jack Hughes from Wang Chung, a guitarist I'd worked with on the House of Stone and Light, the Blue Nile, the Scottish band, a keyboard player called PJ Moore, Russell Broom, great musicians that I'd used in the past. They all sort of arrived. Neil Taylor, again, I have to say this because of Bristol and Bath. Neil Taylor was Tears for Fears guitarist. He'd been on the road with me and worked with me. Everybody arrived at this time 5 years ago here at my house as ancient musicians all coming together and saying, let's do it again, let's try it. And so this record happened without me actually expecting it to happen, James, in the sense that the songs were written to help to get the players working with me again. But every time we listened to the songs, the players would say, this is some of the best stuff you've done, some of the best stuff you've been playing on. And it grew and it grew and it grew. We got a Zulu choir from South Africa involved, and then a horn section got involved. The songs got bigger and bigger. And then I realized I had a problem on my hands. I had to mix it. It's like, oh my God, there's 1,000 musicians on this, and there's live drummers, and there's horn sections, and there's choirs from South Africa. So the last 5 years, I've been making this record called The First and Last Freedom. And that title refers to my first freedom in life was music, and probably my last freedom will be music. And it was, again, after all these years between House of Stone and Light in the 90s and recently, it became a labor of love. And I've just finished mixing the last track about 2 weeks ago. And again, Ray Parker, who I worked with Ghostbusters, I called him up and said, "Do you feel like playing some guitar?" And he goes, "Yes." And so it became a very special record, but a hard record to finish, because I felt I needed to honor everybody's playing on it. Bill Dillon, the guitarist from Canada who played with Robbie Robertson, I met him at that period. So it's become a very special record. And through the COVID breakdown and not being able to work with people, I finished the record. I mixed it through that period. So in a way, for me, it was a time where I could concentrate and bring all the music together in the place I saw it. So I hope to release it early next year. That's my goal. I don't want to release it now because we're still fighting COVID, and a lot of the music industry isn't totally back. But that's been the project that's been enveloping my life really for the last probably 5 years.
It sounds an ambitious project. It sounds very exciting. But do you have a plan with the launch of the record, how you want to go about releasing it? And I know you're a particular fan of the old way of listening to music with, vinyl records and so on. We've seen a resurgence of vinyl. What's your kind of plan with the launch of the new album?
I mean, that's a great question, really great question, because the record for me was finished about 3 weeks ago. And I was talking to my manager about it, that where we kind of treasure this record. And it's not really the era of CDs. It's not really, although vinyl has come back, we thought, let's just concentrate on how we would really put this record out so that people could see the lyrics, people could see the musicians that played on it. And we feel like out of all the music I've been doing, maybe this album, and I have to joke about it, you go, how many more are you going to do at this age? So I do think that this record is like, let's do it the best way we can. Vinyl, lyric sheets, great photos, a video, EPK. So I'm trying to rev myself up to say next year, let's try and have one more go at putting something out in the way we used to always do it. Like you say, the 70s, when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, when you bought a record, it was a very, very irreverent moment, and you'd live with that record and you'd really take it in. So I'm hoping with the First and Last Freedom that I have enough energy to do that one more bloody time.
It's been an interesting few years for all platforms. Music, we saw a big change with streaming, particularly with things like Spotify. We're seeing it with film now, with streaming services like Netflix and Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, and so on. And
will we ever go to a cinema again?
Yeah, I do kind of agree with you. I do think music fans and film fans do want to see film and experience music in that way of holding the actual product, putting the scene into the player.
It's a tactile thing, isn't it? In the studio here, I've got a vinyl player on, in the studio, so that every now and then we pull out a very special vinyl record, turn the lights down, and we just play that. My musicians and people that are friends of mine, and we just lay back, for a good hour and play that music in semi-darkness and take it in. If it's Joni Mitchell, Miles Davis, or the Beatles, it's that, I think, I feel sorry for the kids, because everything's so quick and so fast that when you get it, you don't fall in love with it. It's so quick. You can get another one. But in our day, and particularly with vinyl, that you used to put that record on, sit back, put the needle on, and just feel it. And I think that made it I mean, you're worried when you speak like that because you sound like an old man just pining back to the past, which I am. But I still think when I've had young people come here, and my drummer has young kids, and they still want to listen to Led Zeppelin on a vinyl record because they can't believe the sound, the bass, the deepness, the whole sense of mixing a record and it being, not just from a somebody's bedroom, where it's all done on Pro Tools and Auto Tune. So I still think that if kids were more aware of how special art is back then, I think there's a chance that vinyl and CDs will come back in a sense that people will want to, James, how would you find a Joni Mitchell now? How would you find her? It'd be difficult because there's so many things to choose from. And I think we have a luxury of pushing a button and hearing so many things, and we get bored with it. So I think that's the only thing that is really suffering with digital and music, is that there's too much choice. And so much crap gets out there, and it's hard to maybe find something that's very special. That's my story.
Some great thoughts of the old way of listening and the kind of new streaming platforms. It's obviously been a really difficult time for the entertainment industries, particularly music, cinema, theatre, and so on. During the pandemic. As a songwriter, has it affected you in any way? And do you find your songwriters changed in any way during the period?
That's an interesting question. I don't think it has. I think I've always been a hermit, so I've always been, these kind of rooms are where I live in. And so even when I was a young musician in Bristol, I was always thinking one day, the biggest thing that a musician can get is his own studio, with your own tape machine. I mean, imagine it. Imagine having your own tape machine and you can make records at home. So through COVID, I just felt like, in a way, like, okay, I'm on my own again a bit longer, no problem. I'll mix this big album. So for me, it's a terrible time. And we're still dealing with it. But I know for me as a musician, it was, I've never been a great fan of thousands of human beings mingling together. So for me, it was like, you have to leave me now. I have to mix this record. And so for me, I don't think my songwriting changed at all, because I think I've always lived, James, slightly in this sense of an unreal world. I'm always looking for the poetry and that's a little bit higher than what possibly we would be dealing with at that time. So I don't think my songwriting changed to make that. I'll always answer a question long, but I just feel like, in a way, it made me feel like you need to concentrate on the things that you need to finish, because I'm so prolific. I have so many songs not finished that this made me go, okay, I don't have to meet any human beings. I now need to work. And that's what I did.
We get a lovely answer. We're going to move from the current, your recent album, the project you've been working on. We're going to cast the clock back to a very different time and place. We're going to go back to Southampton, the UK now, 1959, the late 1950s. What are your recollections of growing up? And can you tell us about childhood and growing up with your parents, Alan and Ruth?
I was very lucky, James. I had a mum and dad that loved me, and they were into me just being happy. And I know that that's the biggest thing in the world. If your parents, they realized in me that I was a very sensitive lad and I wanted to create. And so they let me sort of live my dreams. I was very, very fortunate. My parents, Ruth and Alan, they just wanted me to be happy. It's as simple as that. And I was one of those kids, James, that wanted to do everything. I wanted to be like you, a DJ. I wanted to do TV. I wanted to be a tennis player. I wanted to be an actor. Then I wanted to be a footballer. And then I want to be a bass player. And my parents were always going like, he's never going to settle. He's never, ever. He wants to be an astronaut this week. He wants to take off. So what are we going to do with him? And they just said, let him flow, let him flow. I was a drummer at first. I was playing drums. I said, get me the Beatles drum kit. Get me Ringo's Ludwig drum kit. And it must be blue and it must be sparkly. It must be exact. And my dad, somehow, my birthday, there it was. So I was just very, very fortunate. Of course, back in Southampton, the 50s, it's a bit austere. You know, you're dealing with the end of the Second World War, and my escape was soccer. My thing was football, and I fell in love with football as much as I did with music. So from the age of about 8 on to 17, that's all I cared about. I had every football shirt from the Premier League. I went out onto the Southampton council estates going, look, I'm wearing the Leeds United shirt. I must be a professional. I must be. And so I fell into the wonderful feeling of wanting to be a soccer player. And Southampton signed me, and I played for Hampshire. I was a captain of England's Southampton schoolboys at 16, played for the Dell, played against Bristol City, all those. Yes, we drew. We didn't beat you, we drew. But that's what I wanted to be. And then I realized, very lucky, that I was going to be an average footballer, that I could go on and play for, you know, Stockport or Blackpool or something lovely. But I just thought, I'm not, you know, I've hit my peak. And every time Southampton travelled, the football team, I was in clubs in the evenings, drinking too much and listening to Motown and dancing with girls. And I thought, oh my God, this is much better than having a broken nose, much better than headbutting people. And music took over my spirit. And from about 18 onwards, I started to learn bass. And again, getting back to Southampton at that time, I asked my mum and dad, you know, could I have a few instruments? And they helped me with the drums. And then they bought me a bass and just said, keep them quiet. But it wasn't quiet, was it? Because I'm just playing bass loud in my bloody bedroom. But it was a Southampton. I think I was very fortunate in the sense that Southampton didn't really have a musical background. You know, I think we had the Trogs. That's about as far as we went.
They did a couple of good records, in fairness, didn't they?
They did
the
great
Trogs,
records.
in fairness, yeah.
And I mean, I must admit, they did great records, and even Jimi Hendrix copied them. So, but there wasn't really much going on in Southampton. So I went to art college, as all musicians do. In Southampton, I went to the art college, got a grant that the money was supposed to get you to buy paint and paper. I went and bought a car and a bass guitar and an amp. Started to drive all around the country. Sign me. I can slap the bass. And I went to Oxford and joined a great funk band. Eventually, after terrible failures and being turned down at auditions, and joined a band called Cabasa, very funky band that played average white band. I wanted to be a bass player. I wanted to be copying American music. And then I eventually ended up in Bristol, joining a band called Toby. And I'll give a shout out now for the great guitarist, Brian Allen. Toby, back in the years, I think you mentioned the club. What's a club that's very famous in Bristol?
Yeah, there was an old venue, and somebody wrote a book about 15 years ago on it called the Granary Club, the old Granary.
That's where we played. Yeah. And we were quite a big band in Bristol. And I lived in Bristol, Clifton, and all around that area, and spent about 4 years really, you know, becoming a professional musician. So I have a real soulful connection to Bristol. Our accents, and yours and mine, you can tell they're like ooh. But that's how it all started. You know, it was the sense also. I mean, the vibe that music was changing then. So when I was going to the Pier in Southampton, where we used to dance on a Monday night, we were playing reggae. So you're hearing Toots and the Maytals, you're hearing Bob Marley, you're hearing the Pioneers, and you're also hearing the Supremes and Motown. And of course, you turn on the TV in that period, early 60s, and you see the Beatles doing Love Me Do. And as a kid, you know, you saw Chuck Berry playing live. When you get changed and it really hits you, I thought I need to be a bass player. You know, first it was going to be soccer, and then it turned into being a professional musician. Of course, my parents, who'd said, you know, buy my drum kit, buy my bass guitar, buy my mandolin, anything to keep them happy. They didn't believe being a bass player and leaving art college and playing with all these bands. They said, he's never going to make it. You know, he can't concentrate. But what was beautiful, James, is that I never let go of music. Music actually took me over. And in their lifetime, Alan and Ruth saw that I had success, which meant a lot to me.
It seems an interesting time. You come around about 1981, which is 40 years ago. An interesting time in music, because you've got kind of the decline of punk in the late 70s. You've got this kind of new wave thing going on with really great bands like Blondie, and you got XTC. And you formed this band called Q-Feel with a friend of yours, Brian Fairweather. I wanted to ask how you met Brian and how the band sort of came about, and then the success of the record that kind of gave you a ticket to America, which is Dancing in Heaven.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question, but ultimately, you know, you're in Oxford and you're in Bristol and you're in Southampton, you want to get to London, because in London is where it's going to happen. It's the capital, and that's where all the music venues you wanted to play and all the record companies were. So I remember that after playing with Bronx, the Bristol band, I went back to America for a while because my father was a British aerospace engineer. And so I had a lot of time in America as a kid while my dad was in America, and I fell in love with American music. And when I eventually came back to Bronx, I thought, I need to go to London. I'm into the funk. I'm into Bootsy Collins. I'm into Sly and the Family Stone. I'm into James Brown. And when I arrived in London, I joined a band called the Charlie Mullen Band, a very notorious band because the lead singer ended up, I think, going to jail for about 30 years for conning the world, it seems. I'm still trying to find him, but I think he's locked away. But when I joined the Charlie Mullen Band, which is a whole, you know, you could write a book on it. I met Brian Fairweather, I became the musical director. And so I was interviewing guitarists for the band. And Charlie said, just pick the right guitarists. And Brian came along, and I wanted to be like Thin Lizzy, you know, 2 guitars on each side of the bass player, really, really powerful. And Brian and I just really hit it off as songwriters. And we realized pretty early on that it's about songs. It's about songs. It's about it's not about how good you look, how well you perform. Really deep down, every time we went to a record company, it was like, well, where are the songs going to come from? Where's the hits? And so we decided to put a little 4-track studio in my Islington flat, and we wrote Dancing in Heaven and said, it's fantastic. It's a great demo. Let's go and go to some of the labels in London. And Chrysalis were interested, and then Jive Records actually signed us. And we made an album, and we made Dancing in Heaven after some time. And it exploded in America because it was the time, as you pointed out, the early 80s, when Tom Dolby, Thompson Twins, Ultravox, Depeche Mode, everything was changing with technology. And we became that, you know, even though I was a funky bass player, I just thought, you know, Ultravox. And if you listen to Dancing in Heaven, you can hear Ultravox in our first record, because I was thinking that's where music's going to go to. All Stood Still. That's really what I nicked it from. Oh my God, I just told the truth. Oh my God.
slip.
Cut that out. Cut that. But then it happened in America. My father had been in America as an engineer. I decided to fly over to America, to LA. And Brian and I saw that Dancing in Heaven was exploding in LA. It was an underground hit. K-Rock was a radio station in LA that was breaking it. And I stayed. And at the beginning of the 80s, I just took that hit, Dancing in Heaven in LA, into all the record companies. And all the record companies wanted Brian and me to produce their artists, from Kim Carnes to Commodores to Earth, Wind and Fire. So great timing, James, great timing. That's what it was. It was timing.
From your point of view, you obviously wanted this career as a songwriter, but did you feel that you had to move to America? That was your only choice, to move away from the UK?
I did, yeah.
And then
I did.
Then obviously, eventually, Diane Poncher becomes your manager. How did you meet her? How did that come about?
It's a fantastic story. I still can't quite believe how it happened. But Brian and I, when we were back in London in the 80s and signing to Jive Records, they said, work with Reckless Eric. Now, Reckless Eric was a punker, as you probably know.
Yeah, they made a documentary on him a couple of years back.
Yeah, and in the book, Stiff Books, it's me and Brian are mentioned in Stiff's history, because we were the last thing to try and get Reckless Eric a hit. So we were doing demos with Reckless Eric and trying to keep him off the booze and just bring him into the house and writes in Islington. So he wrote about 6 songs with Reckless. You wouldn't expect it because we were American influenced, and Reckless was a punk, but we got on with him. They eventually said, let's put you in a big studio in London to do the actual record. So I was in the studio with my band, Q Phil. We said, you'll be the Reckless Eric band. And Reckless never turned up. He got nervous and just said, this is all too powerful for me and all too glossy and all too focused. The demos are fantastic, James. I've still got the demos. Sometimes I just want to play them, but I have to be careful about it. And in that time when Reckless Eric would not come into the studio, I started talking to a lady that was the studio manager in Battery Studios in London. And she said, and I said, I'm cheesed off with this. Reckless isn't going to do this record. I need to go to America. And she goes, if you go to America, you have to knock on the door of one of my best friends, Diane Poncher, who works for Cavallo, Ruffalo, Farinoli. I know it sounds like a Spaghetti Meteors kind of a management company, but they were very powerful. So I said, yeah, if Reckless doesn't do this album, I'm taking me and Brian to LA. Luckily, Dancing in Heaven is breaking in LA. And I go and knock on Diane's door and just say, hey, my mate, a mate of yours from Joyce from Battery Studios said I should speak to you. And there it began. Diane was working with Ray Parker Jr. She got me to do Ghostbusters with Ray Parker. And she was with the management company that was handling our heroes. How lucky could you be? Earth, Wind and Fire, Weather Report, Little Feat, Prince, The Time. And there are these 2 English guys sort of falling into bliss. But we had all these songs. And so Diane heard our songs. I played it to her on the piano, played her some cassettes. And Diane said, Bob Cavallo, the manager of Earth, Wind and Fire, should hear this. And Bob Cavallo said, you're crazy. You 2 English guys are crazy. And that's what everybody's getting excited about in the 80s. You should meet Maurice White. And so I met Maurice White, and Earth, Wind and Fire, everything moved on from that point. So I'm trying to put a whole career into like one sentence, but that's how I met Diane. And Diane was instrumental in bringing Brian and I to American artists. And of course, James, you're coming at the right time. Everything was on the radio. Our song was on the radio. Everybody wanted to get near to English songwriters because we were using the Fairlight, the Synclavier, Depeche Mode were breaking, Tom Dolby, Blinded by Science. So we came at the right time. So if they couldn't get Tom Dolby at that time, who they wanted to work with, there was me and my mate. And we said, we'll be the reserves. We'll come in and do the job for you. So lucky timing.
Lucky timing, the door had opened, interesting times, a change in the times. And you're working with all these people out of LA. You've only been there sort of within a few months. You're working with people like King Carnes, Earth, Wind and Fire, and so on. Did part of you feel even quite nervous during that period? Because I guess you were still quite young, in some ways still quite unestablished, new to the industry. Was there a part of you that was a little apprehensive, or did you feel you were in that creative bubble and everything was just going as planned?
Oh, it's a fantastic question because, it's years back. I can only go off of the feel of what it was then. And I think the answer to that is both things, really, James, that when you're young and you're so passionate about what you do and you start to see a little bit of success, you really believe in it. And I had Brian with me, my partner, and so I had my best friend. The 2 of us felt like we were against the world, and there was crazy humor with us every time we went into a record company. They fell in love with us because we were stupid, but we understood synthesizers and keyboards and the new technology. But at the same time, actually, we were staying at Diane's house. We were sleeping on the floor. She just said, well, if you're going to go and see all the record companies, you can kip on the living room floor. And every time we went out in a hire a wreck car, because we had no money, we'd go to all these record companies, and I'd come home every night and I'd write down what every A&R man had said. And I thought, they're into us, we can get, I have to jump back here, that Brian and I wrote songs which weren't just Q-Phil. We wrote songs which sounded like Boss Skaggs, sounded like Earth, Wind and Fire, sounded like the Doobie Brothers. We were very influenced by American music. So We weren't just a techno duo. We also were writing songs which were ballads. We were very much into great songwriting. So what happened was that when I came back to Diane's house and went to sleep on the floor, the phone never stopped ringing. We had an answer phone. We had like 700 calls the same night. We'd like to record that song you played us. We'd like you to meet with the Commodores. They need to change their sound. We'd like you to meet with the Earth, Wind & Fire. So it all ignited, and it was a little bit nerve-wracking. I mean, your question about nerves was ever so exciting. I think like a football player, like we're in the cup final. You know, you're not gonna not play, but you're still going to be a little bit pensive and go, oh my God, this is the big time. And we told James, everybody that we met, that we understood, Brian and I, because we were the techno kids, the new boys on the block, that we knew how to program a synclavier, which was the, $70,000 new sampler. Well, we had no idea at all, nothing. So every time we went into a studio, they say, are you the guys that know how to program a synclavier? And we go, yeah, but we don't have one today. I'm afraid we tried to hire it. We couldn't get it. So let's just work on a Jupiter 8. So there was a lot, there was a lot of sleight of hand going on. But I do believe that when Brian and I, when we came into a room with, say, Kim Carnes, who'd, had the hit with Betty Davis Eyes, we really, really had so much enthusiasm, so much desire, so much naive desire to do it, that it enveloped everything. When you've got great energy and great spirit, I think everybody goes along with you, and our music was quite strong. When I do my radio shows, I play some of the demos and I listen back and I go, I wish I could write that now. That's really good. So I think we had the goods, but we were nervous and confident at the same time.
Next, we're going to talk about a #1 hit record that's still regularly played all the time on radio today. We Built This City for Starship, but it was the first collaboration with Elton John's prolific long-term partner, Bernie Taupin. How did you meet Bernie, and tell us a bit about working together?
It was the same thing, James, in the sense that LA at that time, everybody was interested in the new music. So I went to a certain publisher who handled Bernie Taupin, and they said, we'd love Bernie Taupin to come into the future. We'd like him to be lit up, and you seem like the guy to do it. Would you be interested? And of course, I'd grown up loving Elton John's music, from Tumbleweed Connection onto all his albums. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road really hit me as a kid. So again, it was the same thing, that record companies and publishers were saying, you're in town, you're the new thing. Would you be interested in working, which I think is one of the best popular lyricist of my time. And so we met at a restaurant. He was not working with Elton at that time, so he was taking a hiatus, and he was into it. He just said, let's try something. And so, as we all know, Bernie doesn't actually sit in a room and write with you. He sends you or gives you lyrics up front. So my fax machine, remember those? You probably don't, but
I can remember them very well.
You
yeah.
do?
Yeah,
you're older than you look.
It felt like forever and a day to get the message, didn't it?
Well, I used to be in the studio like this, just playing around under here. And it was just like getting the football results on ticker tape or something. It was like, Bernie's written another lyric. I better go and have a look. And the first two lyrics he gave me were We Built This City and These Dreams, although These Dreams was a different title. So I just wanted to impress Bernie. He took a chance on me. I was a new kid in town. He was a new kid in town, like 10 years before me. And so I wanted to bring Bernie into the future. I wanted him to feel like he wasn't. Elton's a brilliant, brilliant writer, but I just wanted him to feel like he was working with somebody who understood that how technology was changing. So we wrote We Built the City together. But he gave me the lyrics. I sent him a cassette back. Remember cassettes?
I can indeed, yeah.
Okay, you are older than I am. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, 40 this year, so yeah.
So I sent him a cassette, and you wait, and then the phone rings, and Bernie said, I love it. Yeah, it's great. And we started to circulate it around town. We built the city around LA. The Motels, a pretty famous band, took interest in it, but they didn't record it. And then Peter Wolf, not the Peter Wolf from the J. Giles band, but Peter Wolf, who was an Austrian producer, he connected with me working on the Commodores, and he took that song and he said, I think Starship should record that. I didn't really know who Starship was, and I didn't really like Jefferson Starship. I thought it was, no songs, crappy. Same with Heart, with These Dreams. I thought rock and hard rock, but not really any songs. That's how I felt, because I was a pop writer. But then when Starship recorded it, although I didn't like the recording of it, as soon as it started, I got the charts. I just thought, oh my goodness, something special's happening here. I mean, think about it, James. 40 years later, we're talking about a song that I wrote on an 8-track Fostex in a rented room in LA, and it's still the most powerful song I've written. It's beyond me. It's if I live here in Encino, and if I walk down the road and speak to somebody and say, hello, you're my neighbor, and I say, what do you do? So I'm a songwriter. Oh, okay. What have you written? Well, a song called We Built This City. We built this city on rock. And I go like, oh my God, it's my ticket to life.
When you're working with someone like Bernie Taupin, and you've worked with him on numerous occasions, how does the relationship work? Does one of you concentrate more on the lyrics, the words, and one of you the instrumentation, or do you kind of collaborate?
No, but Bernie is all lyrics. Bernie's all lyrics. Everything is lyrics.
Yeah.
And he writes the lyrics up front. So all the time I did with Bernie, and I haven't been with Bernie for 10 years, whatever, maybe even longer. But when we had the success with We Built the City and These Dreams, we got very close. I recorded a solo record with him and wrote the songs and produced them. But it was lyrics came first, always. I think only once did I go to him and say, I need an extra bridge here for a song. I think on a song called Desperation Train on his solo record. But Bernie doesn't like to be in a room with you, working with you. It's like, this is what it is. It's great. Deal with it. And, I've said it many times, but I think he's the greatest popular lyricist of our times. And I'd worked with a lot, from Hal David, with Bacharach. I'd written songs with him, and I'd written with many, many lyricists, because that's how I sort of was. They thought of me. They thought, just give him a lyricist, he'll write the music. So Bernie's always with Bernie. He sent me the lyrics, and the greatest thing was I could do all the demos here at home on 8-track or whatever, and then I just send him a cassette, and he just call me and go, "Sounds cool, man. Sounds great. Let's send it out." So that was a wonderful thing for me as well. Also, people said, how is it to just, to write to lyrics? And I thought it came so naturally to me that somebody gave me a poem and I could just write to it. I didn't even think about it, and I've known other writers say, how can you write a song to words that are already there? But to me, I thought Bernie wrote in such a rhythmic and understanding of what Brown Sugar was by the Rolling Stones. He knew where a bridge was, he knew where the verse was, he knew where the chorus came. So I realized that Bernie understood pop songs and where you would have a solo, where you would have a bridge. And he also wrote rhythmically. So for me, I'm quite a funky writer. I could feel that his lyrics, when I sang them, were so percussive. And so that was the routine. I never started anything and gave it to Bernie. He'd start the whole thing.
In my 20s, I was a massive CD collector. I'd always be in record shops buying CDs and putting them on my shelf in alphabetical order and just constantly.
Are they behind you now? Is that them behind you?
There's a few behind me, but this is a very.
Is my record there? Is my record there?
It
doesn't look like it. Why is your head moving over? It doesn't look like it's there.
I remember buying the Robbie Robertson debut album on CD, and I think it opens with the track "Fallen Angels," which is one of my favorite songs of yours.
Thank you, James.
Song. But what was it like working with Robbie Robertson? Incredible name, a very prestigious past with working with Dylan, working in the band. How was that collaboration? Did it differ much from working with Bernie Taupin?
Absolutely. It was absolutely different to working with Bernie. Absolutely. You couldn't be farther away from what it was with Bernie. I think the lucky thing, James, was I wasn't absolutely totally aware who Robbie Robertson was. I was very much a pop boy. So my manager, Diane, had a great heritage of knowing, from Dylan, Big Pink, the band. I didn't really have an understanding of the band because I'd come from a real pop background. And that worked in my favor because when they said, do you want to work at Geffen Records, said to me, we'd love you to get with Robbie Robertson and write him a hit. Well, you're not going to write a hit for Robbie Robertson. I mean, he wrote down The Night That Drove Old Dixie Down, you know what I mean? And The Weight. And so, but I knew what they were doing again. They were saying, let's put this high energy guy in a room with Robbie and see what happens. The good thing was when I met with Robbie, there was a real communication of what we liked. And he was very open to new music at that time. You wouldn't think it, but he was sat in a room very much like this at a studio called The Village in LA, which is very famous, where Fleetwood Mac record. He had this special room upstairs where he just had his 32-track Sony digital recorder, and he experimented. And I would come in and play him ideas. First, the record company said, let's send a cassette of yours to Robbie, and if he likes it, he'll allow you in. Well, I sent some demos, and he said, come on in. But as soon as, like you and me, as soon as we started talking, and I said to him, well, I'm into the Cocteau Twins. I'm into Prefab Sprout. I'm into the Blue Nile. He was into that as well. So he was much more advanced in what he was listening to. And he gave me the great opportunity of coming back into this room and writing something and then going back to him at the Village and playing him stuff. Very different to what it was with Bernie, because Bernie, here's the lyric, do your thing, off you go. Robbie was, took a year to write Fallen Angel. And I couldn't grasp how long it was taking. So every time I came to the Village to play him the song, he'd say, yeah, you're singing that well. That's good. But I think there's something else. And so I'd go back home, do some more work, bring it back to him and go, now I've changed the melody and I've done some more keyboards. And he'd go, yeah. I think we're getting somewhere. Let's spend another year on it. So it went on and on and on. But in that period, James, I learned that I needed to make my own record, House of Stone and Light, because Robbie was looking for emotion. And, I didn't realize it, but he was thought of as the greatest guitarist, and the Geffen record said, get him to play guitar because he doesn't want to play it anymore. I didn't really think about that. I thought about the melodies and the songs. And then when Peter Gabriel got involved with Daniel Lanois and sang Fallen Angel, the whole song became a hymn to me. And I'm glad you chose that song because that's my favorite song I've ever written, the way it's recorded. It was a long process, but the feel of Fallen Angel. And interestingly enough, I'll throw this in, that Bernie Taupin, who I was working with and doing We Built the City, he'd left and gone back to Elton John. He came back to America and he goes, I hear you're working with Robbie Robertson. That's my favorite artist of all time. And he said, how did that happen? I said, I don't know. I just, put on some cowboy boots, put on a cowboy hat, went in, and I became the band for a while. So, Fallen Angel is my favorite song, the way it's portrayed. But my God, it took over a year to get that right. First it was called War of Angels, and Trevor Horn was going to produce it. It was changing all the time. Yeah, changing all the time.
Would have been interesting to hear a mix by Trevor Horn. I would have loved to have heard.
Yes, it would have.
It would have been interesting.
Very interesting. And when that happened, when Robbie said to me, I think that this is called War of Angels. It's the descendants of Lucifer coming down onto Earth. It was very big, and then eventually, I'm glad I can think of this. Robbie called me in one day and he said, "I've got it. I know what Fallen Angel is about. It's about Richard Manuel, the keyboard player of the band. That I'm writing to him. He committed suicide. I miss him, And he had a tear in his eye, a tear in my eye. It just felt so special. And his words then became very intimate, and that's how that's what Fallen Angel is about. It's about Richard Manuel, the keyboard player.
You had numerous hits, 2 number ones. You've worked with various musicians, collaborations, and then it was time to make your own solo record. What made you decide to do that? And were you kind of just determined it was time for you to focus on being a solo musician rather than giving your songs to somebody else?
Well, I think the way you've asked these questions, they roll in a logical way, because Fallen Angel with Robbie Robertson, that period that I did with him, I wrote 2 songs, in a period of 2 years with him, Hell's Half Acre as well. I just felt that experience with Robbie put me into really good form to do my own record. So I think it was just the right time to do it. I was, again, an older artist, and I'm glad that I made a record at that age, because you know what's real about my singing. My singing was changing. I was writing about personal things the same way Robbie was writing about, Richard Manuel. So, and I thought, I'll put a studio here. You can probably see behind me, there's a 24-track analog recorder there. And so I decided to do what Robbie did, put everything in my house in this garage and make a full-fledged record at home, because that's what he was doing at the Village. My manager, Diane Poncher, had always said, when the time's right, and you believe in yourself, you're going to make a solo record. So making In the House of Stone and Light, I think was because I'd been with Maurice White, Bernie Taupin, and Robbie Robertson. They'd all said to me, whenever we hear you singing the demos for us to sing, there's a certain amount of emotion and power in your voice that you can't recognize. So they gave me confidence, and I did it in the later years. Yeah.
We're going to talk a bit about the creative process, and I bet you're asked these kind of questions all the time, but how does the songwriting experience work for yourself? And do you write from like personal life experience? And does the process begin with the lyrics, or does it begin with the instrumentation?
Another great question. In the early years, it was all to do with music. So I would just sit at the keyboard, learning as I went, and I'd hear a sound like Jupiter 8 or a synthesizer, and it would get me going. And it was to do with groove. In the later years now, words are very important to me, and titles are. So I would say it's a mixture of everything now. But in the early years, it was like, let's just get a sound, let's get a rhythm, let's get a feel, and I will jam on it and we'll do it. But now I find that I'm writing and I can have a title already written down in a little black book, or I can be reading a book and I can look at a sentence and go, that is a fantastic sentiment. And in fact, In the House of Stone and Light was that way that I've been down to the Grand Canyon. The Indians have a Supai Shame Indians tribe. They called the Grand Canyon the House of Stone and Light. And I just wrote that title down, and it meant something to me. So I think it's changed over the years. I don't think you can really nail a songwriter and say this is what it always is, because if you think about it, the old fax machine would be going, and then I get a lyric, and it's like a menu. Off we go. And in the early years, just before that, it was like, what a great drum rhythm, what a great groove. We have something started here. And in the later years, it's been more about what do I want to say? What's inside me? What's personal? So I think from the early years, it was just learning your art and emulating. In the later years, it's like, I really need to get my soul across. So I think it changes.
You've worked in the music industry now for over 40 years. How has the songwriting business changed over those years?
My God, James, now we're in the digital age, we're into streaming. So it's best way I can portray this. I feel fortunate that I've gone through all these different changes, but when I started, it was 2-track Revox, 2-track tape machine. So you're bouncing, like the Beatles, 2 tracks across, and then I got a 4-track, then you got an 8-track, then I had a 16-track in here, then a 24-track, and now Pro Tools, 1,000 tracks. So technology, I think, really, really does push the way art is portrayed. I think technology makes songwriters and artists respond to the new technology. So I've seen it all. I've seen what it's like to say we've got 4 tracks. We have to put the drums on one and put the vocals here and put the bass here and then bounce it all down. The Beatles were doing that. And now I'm at a point now with the technology that you can just turn on your Pro Tools and do 3,000 tracks. That doesn't mean it's better at all. If anything, it means it's probably worse because you have too many choices. But the industry now is under the influence of speed, technology, speed. I remember reading about a film director who said, hey, you know, I want to still do my edits on analog because it takes a while. It gives me time to think if I'm doing the right thing. So I think that now that we push a button and we go Spotify, I want all the albums by Rufus, everything. You don't really take it in what you're getting. So your question was about how it's changed for a songwriter, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I think that we are, at my age, I mean, I can't speak for the young kids, but my age is I'm trying to think like, what can I write that has presence and emotion and maybe will go on longer. I've always been this way, but you know, what can you write as a song that will last more than a month, that will transcend, like We Built the City or Fallen Angel? I still feel that way, but I think we're not in a great place with technology, even though here's my analog room with all the amplifiers and the compressors that are digital on the old keyboards. In the other room here is all is Pro Tools, and we have to use Pro Tools because that's the medium now. You know, that is what we have to work on. But that's 1,000 tracks, 2,000 tracks, 3,000 tracks. It doesn't make you really focus sometimes on the element of emotion. That's how I feel. You know, I think sometimes when you're held back a little teeny bit, you have to think a bit, are we doing the right thing here? Are we really communicating on a special level? So as a songwriter, and I've been through all these different processes, it's very attractive to, as we're doing now on Zoom, very attractive to be on digital. It's so easy, you know, and it's magical. But I'm not sure that makes us sit down and write a great book. I don't think that makes us sit down sometimes and feel that there's something in the darkness, some solitude, some sense of cutting off, so that you present something which is extraordinary. So I don't think it's the most easy period for a songwriter, but possibly not the most spiritual.
It's very hard to compare eras from today and yesteryear, and obviously the industry's changed, the market. But we've mentioned in the interview some great artists. You've mentioned, you know, the Beatles, we've mentioned the Stones, we mentioned people like the Band. But if you go back to the era of like the 60s, for example, when people were producing and selling millions of singles, it just seemed second nature. Like Lennon and McCartney were just writing hit after hit. Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, who I think are underrated as songwriters, just wrote hit after hit. Do you think modern bands now struggle to write great, catchy pop songs?
God, that's a great question. What came to mind straight away was Coldplay. You know, the Coldplay have been hitting pretty strong for a period of time, and they've had to manipulate themselves from being just from Yellow, you know, and U2 vibes into something which has a dance and anthem vibe to them. So, you know, I don't think I can really answer that, because I think it's very easy to. I mean, I'm really thinking about this carefully, because when I was writing my hits, you are aware what's happening in the charts. You know, you're aware, and in my later years, I don't listen to the charts as much. I'm thinking about what can I get out that is, can I sing this right? So in those earlier years, and, you know, relating to Coldplay now, they've got to always think about what is the next hit.
And I guess back when you were writing songs, you had the radio, you had the top 40 countdown, you had Top of the Pops, which was significant. All of that's kind of gone. It's gone today, hasn't it? It's a totally different era.
It's true. You know, we wait for Thursday night and we put on Top of the Pops, and we would be seeing, you know, Gene Genie by Bowie. You'd get it on by T-Rex, and of course you were like, this is fucking great. Mungo Jerry in the summertime, you know. And that is very true, because also as I grew up as a musician, it's very perceptive what you're saying is we went to BBC Two and we watched the Old Grey Whistle Test.
Yeah.
So there you would see from pop music, which I think I'm full of, as well as Jethro Tull, Average White Band, Genesis. You start to see on the Old Grey Whistle test these wonderful bands that played live and were making albums, because that's also an album period, the 70s.
And then
It's a beautiful.
Sorry, and then
go ahead.
Then in the 80s, you kind of had a lot of, again, the Old Grey Whistle test kind of spin off with Channel 4's The Tube, which was kind of a groundbreaking
Absolutely,
show.
absolutely.
Fantastic show, yeah.
And one of my friends is Steve Blacknell, who used to run London Calling, you know, and yeah, The Tube. We still get it on every now and then on MTV here in America. And of course, this is a great conversation, because MTV now, you know, when I came across on the 80s, that was the power. You know, we built this city, King of Wishful Thinking would go west. It's all on MTV. Now MTV has become, you know, more of a drama kind of series, you know, families breaking up at the age of 7. It's like got into another world altogether. But in that era that we were all learning, you know, from seeing the Beatles in black and white doing Love Me Do, right through the Top of the Pops and seeing Bowie do and Slade do it, you know, you'd see these bands and it would inspire you as a musician. And now it's almost like all you need to do to be a musician is have a finger to go download. And I'm going to sit in my room and make an album, bang. Doesn't mean it's going to be, it could be brilliant. And I'm sure Joni Mitchell's out there again. But it's so hard to spot them because there's so much there.
Coming back to the modern songwriters who want to get into the industry, they want their music to be heard and published. What would be your advice to them looking to make a career in the current music industry and climate?
You know, it's my era was very much about human contact. So even though you could send cassettes in or you know, send your songs through the post, I always felt like you had to sit in front of somebody and say, let me play you this song and I'm going to sing it to you live and I'm going to thrill you with it. So human contact was really important. You know, I knew that if I sent We Built the City just through the post, nothing. If you're there going, listen to this bridge, Marconi play, if you get them going, you know, human contact. And even now, I'm still, you know, prolific, but everything is email, you know, and everything is download. So there's the human contact has gone out of music quite distinctly through this period. It may come back. I could only say to a songwriter to have, there's nothing else but passion. There's nothing else that you can say to any songwriter is like, I just love fucking doing this. And I would not be happy if I did not do it. It has to just fulfill you. Even when I had my success, it wasn't so much like I really, really want the money. I want success. I want this, I want that. It was like people respond to what I do and it's turning people on. So I still think it's the same thing. You have to be the same with you doing your YouTube show. Nobody's going to stop you doing it, whatever, you know, nobody's going to stop you doing it because it's what you need to do. And ultimately, if you love doing it, I know it sounds cliche, but if you love doing it and you care about it, somebody else is going to bump into you and go, oh, I want to be part of the team. I want to be with you. I want to be there. So I think you have to be, you know, if I was talking to a crowd of songwriters, I'd say you have to be very aware of Pro Tools. You have to be very aware of how to get on CD Baby. You have to be very aware of the internet. You have to be very aware of how to do social media. But beyond that, you have to love music. Simple as that. It's not changed since Beethoven. You know what I mean? You have to love it.
I can ask you 2 final questions, and then we're going to come to our quick fire question round at the end.
I'm leaving quick fire. I don't want to deal with that. That's too scary.
Very scary.
I've heard about it.
In the hot seat. You've written so many wonderful songs. We've mentioned these during the course of the interview. These Dreams, a #1 hit for Heart. King of Wishful Thinking by Go West. My favorite, Fallen Angel by Robbie Robertson, and so many more. Do you have a personal favorite? And if so, why?
I think I said it to you. You know, I think Fallen Angel, because of the way it was recorded and the musicianship and Peter Gabriel singing on it, I've always loved choral music. So as a schoolboy growing up in England, I was always, you know, I'm not religious, but I was always in the churches listening to great choirs. So Fallen Angel to me was a hymn. So that's my favorite recording of any of my songs. I think These Dreams is is the melodically and harmonically the best song I've ever written, because it just is. It took 10 minutes to write. I mean, it's funny, Fallen Angel took, over a year. These Dreams took 10 minutes, but chordally, I think it's a beautiful song to look at. House of Stone and Light, because I was real at that period in my life. And probably the latest album I've done, Fugitive Pieces. I mean, there's a lot of songs on there, but to me, it's like one song, Fugitive Pieces, because it was a period when I was fighting depression, and I wrote a very at the piano kind of intimate piece. But if we nailed it right down to one, could only nail it down to 3, really. Yeah, Fallen Angel, These Dreams, and In the House of Stone and Light.
And in your business, being accompanied by so many brilliant songwriters from past, present, and even today, are there any songs that you hear or you listen to regularly that you just think, I really wish I'd written that song? probably loads. Yeah. Is there kind of I don't know, say 5 that you just think, I just
oh my God, yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I'm such a fanatic. I'm such a fanatic. I could mention tons, but let's have a go at this then. 5, you said, right?
Yeah, say 5 you take on a desert island that you just think they're just perfectly crafted. Maybe.
Can you actually put my name on them so I make royalties?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do this then. My Sweet Lord, George Harrison, Abraham, Martin and John, recorded by Marvin Gaye. Goodbye Ebbet Road, Elton. No Woman, No Cry by, we're talking about the reggae time, aren't we? We're talking about Toots and the Maytals as well. I liked about that, but Bob Marley, No Woman, No Cry. Last one, oh my goodness. It's a tough one, isn't it? What would I love? Is it good?
It's tough.
I know. I'm just trying to really, really think, because I think it's easy to throw things out. But
Yeah.
Bridge Over Troubled Water by the Boys, Paul Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah, I think that those are the ones. But beyond that, there's another 722 other songs that I wish I'd written, and I need you to put my name on them so that I can make royalties tomorrow.
Royalties from them, yeah.
Hey, if I get royalties from My Sweet Lord tomorrow, I'm going to go, hey, James is really good.
Funny enough, I'm going to mention something about royalties at the end of the interview. Firstly, I really like this part of the interview. We've had some interesting answers in the past, so I'll be interested to hear yours. The final questions before we wrap.
Okay.
Number 1, what's your favorite pastime?
There's 2 actually. I was a soccer player, so I still love to play football now and then. Even as an old man, I like to kick a ball, and I like to make models. I like Airfix models, the old planes. Oh, nice. My dad was an airplane guy, so I built the Lancasters and the Spitfires and the Mustangs and all that shit.
I like that. What's your favorite film and why?
Lawrence of Arabia. And it comes to mind because of Peter O'Toole. And when I was a kid, and I was taken to see that real early, and the guy is shot on the desert, and he's just lying there, and his blood's coming out of his head. I remember going like, "Oh my God, this is so serious." But I loved Lawrence of Arabia. I have to say another film, The Reverend. The Revenant, the recent film, The Revenant. I think it's just filmed so beautifully, and you just feel like you're there.
We're on the theme of writing, but not songs. But who's your favorite novelist?
He's not really a novelist, but it's John Gray, a philosopher who writes books in England. A lot of the philosophy he writes feels like you're reading stories. So John Gray, a book called The Silence of the Animals is that just turned me on. I bought all his stuff. And Dickens, I just feel like you can read a Dickens book anytime and just feel like this is a great story.
And if you could have had a different profession other than songwriting, what would it be?
It'd have to be a football player, soccer. That's what I was doing up to 18. That's what I thought I would be doing. So soccer, football player.
Move on to...
Or graphic designer. I went to art college to learn that as well. I thought I could design a Kellogg's cornflakes bag pretty good, but
next
I'm here.
Who's been your greatest inspiration in life? That's a tricky one.
Not really. It's not tricky. My mum and dad still stay in my mind as being the most loving parents and giving me every opportunity. So mum and dad.
Do you read a newspaper? And if so, which one?
No, I don't. Everything's on the internet now. So I look at Apple News, but it makes me think of what I used to read every day, which was Melody Maker and New Musical Express in London, which was the paper that you read if you were a musician. And actually all my auditions came through the Melody Maker. So in the early years, music magazines.
When you go out to eat or cook for yourself, what's your favorite food?
Fish and chips.
Yeah.
Fish and chips. I mean, come on. I miss them so much. Yeah, fish and chips. Beans on toast as well. I'm very boring, but I'm very good at the microwave. I'm incredibly good on the microwave.
Good fish and chips in LA or not really?
No, you can't get it. It's just me. My mouth is watering now because I'm just thinking about it. You know, cod in a newspaper. Oh my God.
And mushy peas.
Oh, and an onion. And throw an onion in.
Or a pickled egg.
Pickled onion.
Who's your favorite cultural icon?
For goodness me. The Dalai Lama. You know, I do a bit of Buddhism and it keeps me balanced. So the Dalai Lama and a Vietnam Buddhist called Thich Nhat Hanh. So those are the two that I always look for because they are speaking so much wisdom.
When things don't go your way, what is your favorite curse word?
Am I allowed to say it?
Yeah, of course you are.
Are you sure?
Everybody
Fuck
said that.
Me. Fuck me. It shouldn't be that way. For fuck's sake. There you go. I say that to my manager every day. For fuck's sake, it should be more royalties than that.
When you have a tantrum. All us creatives have tantrums, don't we? So, yeah. Away from the work, what's your favorite place or holiday destination?
It's very easy, actually. There's the Huntington Gardens here in Pasadena, in California. I go there regularly. I haven't been able to do that because of COVID for a while, but actually last week I went for the first time after a year. I have a favorite pool there with a 100-year-old turtle comes up and I give him bread. And then I sit under a tree and meditate. So how boring can you really be? But yes, it'd be the Huntington Gardens. Beautiful.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. Back on a music theme, who's your favorite music artist? That's so difficult to answer.
My God.
So many. Yeah. And what's your favorite album?
Bloody hell, you finish with a hard one, don't you? My favorite artist. You know, for me, it's impossible, but I've thought about what I'd have to say early Genesis, Selling In by the Pound, Nursery Crime, the Beatles, of course, Abbey Road, Stevie Wonder, Talking Book, and Music of My Mind. That's 3, right? I did 3. I've got to do 2 more. Is that right?
No, that's fine.
Is that all right? Those 3.
That's all right. Good choices. And the last 2 questions. What's your greatest achievement to date?
God, my goodness me. Being compassionate. I know it's a grand thing to say, but I think that's the thing that, you know, I talk about Buddhism, you strive for that. And empathy. You try to understand what people are going through. I've had a very lucky, very fortunate career because I've met with people that have responded to me. So I think empathy and compassion to other people, and then I think you're able to, you know, get your passions across. I at one time had 6 cats and I thought, this is too much for me. I want to be a bachelor. But I felt like I learned a lot of compassion and about life by looking after those animals. So I think if there's anything I care about is having empathy for other creatures.
And how do you wish to be remembered?
Brilliant fucking songwriter. Just fucking brilliant. Nobody can touch him. He's frightening. I mean, we can only just hail. Simple as that. That's what I want written on my tomb. Brilliant fucking songwriter. We all need to bow down now.
That, I think, is a lovely way of finishing the interview.
I think I've said fuck about 19 times. It's the first time I've ever said that. And you're going like, it's okay. Let it happen. Let it happen.
I've really enjoyed this evening. It's really been good fun for me.
It's been brilliant. Can I just mention, I've got to mention one thing. I've got to just say it because there's a guy in Bristol, you're in Bristol now, called Brian Allen, who was the guitarist that brought me into that band Toby and Bronx in Bristol, and Bristol was a seminal place for me to become a professional musician. So I hope that gets out, because I'm going to let them know on email that I spoke to you and that Bristol's being pointed at.
That will not be edited out of the interview, I promise.
Good.
You've got my promise.
Good.
And the final thing I was going to finish up with was, firstly, thank you for taking part. It really has been a great honor. And, you know,
A pleasure.
I sent the email out a couple of weeks ago, and I never expected you to say yes. So I'm delighted. It's been...
I'm cheap, mate. I'm cheap.
Thank you.
I'll do anything for a couple of dollars. Anything.
My final thing was, last night I was reading over the questions for today, and there's this kind of football show in the UK at the moment with Peter Crouch and a couple.
Oh yeah, Peter Crouch. Yeah. He's really cool, isn't he? Yeah. And he's taller than me.
He's very tall, and they do kind of a chat about the Euros, the games, and it's kind of a little bit of a fun show. And they have this band, and all of a sudden, one of your songs comes on, and they kind of change the lyrics a bit. So it was King of Wishful Thinking, your song.
Wow.
Played by the band. I think they changed the lyrics a little, but might be.
But it was it played by Go West?
No, it was played by the band, the house band.
At the game?
On the TV show, there was kind of a band of guys who were kind of like a little bit funny. It was sick. They changed the lyrics slightly, but it was your song. So yeah.
Wow. You know, I was yesterday I was watching the game against Germany. So everything stops when England played Germany. So being a soccer player, I was watching England win a game that we were scared to win. And so it was an amazing day. But I mean, if King of Wishful Thinking was used, I'm going to have to call my manager straight after you and just say, royalties, make sure we check this out. I've just heard from James. We need money.
You need to indeed. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, as I said. And I'm really looking forward to listening to the new album when it's released. Fingers crossed.
Thank you very much, James. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed it. It was great fun. And look after yourself.
I will do. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye, mate.